Do you want to know how your agency is doing based on its numbers? I want you to check out askquick.ai. This is something you can try out for free. Basically, just click one button, connect it to your QuickBooks, and actually ask it questions like, what are the red flags in my agency? How is my agency doing? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And it actually gives you CFO advice rather than hiring an expensive outsourced CFO or a full-time CFO. Try it out now. Go to askquick.ai. Try it out for free. You're listening to the Smart Agency Masterclass with me, Jason Swank, and we're bringing you this episode courtesy of our friends at Wix Studio. Let's go ahead and get into the show. Hey, Dan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Tell us who you are, what you do.
My name is Dan. I am the managing partner and CEO of VisualFizz. In today's day and age, I'm managing the organization, working on a lot of new biz strategy for the company itself, and trying to continue to scale the business every single day.
How'd you get started in the agency life? Was this an accident, or what's the story?
Great question. I actually worked at basically straight out of college. I started my first business in college, but straight out of college, I started working at agencies as a project manager, coming from ops management and finance background, not knowing that I was ever going to end up in marketing. And I worked at a lot of agencies and kind of took it all in, from the financial backgrounds to the efficiencies and inefficiencies, and looking at, these expensive offices in downtown Chicago. And I was working for the biggest agencies here and the mid-size and even the really small ones. And when I fell in kind of my happy place, which was mid-size, I started running a lot of numbers and looking into, how are we affecting the work that we do for our clients? And I didn't quite agree with how that was being run. It was inefficient. There was too much too much overhead. Ultimately, it was highly inefficient from that perspective. But also the work that was being done was so driven towards build our portfolio, not the client, that I kind of spoke against it for a little while. And I was probably pretty junior to speak against it. That organization lost a couple of clients, and I was a product of a layoff. And during that time, I actually decided I'm going to go contract at a number of places, help out, freelance, etc. And funny enough, I decided, you know what, I'm already selling my time, my hours. Why can I use others as well and build something? So I met my co-founder online, totally random, got booted off of Upwork or Odesk or whatever was on there at the time, because you weren't allowed to ask for location. And we decided, let's chat about it just briefly, decided it's a good fit. And I told her, by the way, I'm going to Asia for an unforeseen amount of time. I'm leaving. This is the only time I've got. And we use it as a test time, I guess. Is this going to work or is it not? And we got our first client, which means we were profitable on day 9 after, that particular first meeting. Ran kind of that plus a couple of small clients in the very beginning. I convinced them, hey, I know you're going to hire me as a freelancer, but what about paying me to be an agency? They were with us for years and ultimately came back from Asia about 3.5, 4 months later with 2 or 3 paying clients and said, okay, this seems like a legitimate business. Let's go at it. Let's LLC it and build something.
What did you charge your first couple clients?
105 an hour. I think retainer was probably $2,500 a month for my first client. And it was interesting because the first goal is, 1, we wanted to be experiential. We changed that pretty quickly. 2, we wanted to be this global brand. I was traveling. I thought, the digital nomad thing is pretty cool. This was in 2016. And I had a client. So they were out actually in Kuwait, these 2 women who had a very successful retail, kind of cool Urban Outfitters-esque business, hired us. And I was in Vietnam. I remember having a call in Vietnam. My clients are in Kuwait, and my team is kind of sporadically placed in South Africa and the United States. And I was like, this is the coolest thing. It's all global. And I quickly learned that's really, really hard. Smaller. Yeah. It was I was it was 2 or 3 in the morning, and I was on top of a old hotel, trying to fight for Wi-Fi. And it was a battle that I did not win.
I remember years ago, and I still see them still. There's some people that go, hey, create an agency, build a nomad and travel the world. And it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah. You've kind of become for me, I've always had this, we'll probably talk about this later, but I've had a personal philosophy or goal to travel 100 days a year, even since we started. And I've hit it most times, but I'm working. I'm not, I'm not hanging out. But it's been limited, especially as we got more busy, to being basically US time zones, plus or minus, like 4 hours. So I've done a lot of travel in like Central America, like in Mexico City and parts of the US, and COVID hit. So that was its own thing. But ultimately, I agree that it can be done, but if you're traveling to Southeast Asia and trying to hit US hours, you're in for a rude awakening.
Yeah, I mean, it's total opposite, right? It's just 12 hours difference or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Even Europe, I mean, you've got to start your workday at like 3 p.m., 4 p.m. And so you can do it, but it's you've got to be used to it. I think if people aren't huge travelers and they're going for the first time, it was challenging. But I was also almost 10 years younger and had little money to spend and was working out of hostels with my laptop, and honestly, it was a great time. It was such a fun part of my life because I didn't have to worry about having a big team and dozens of clients and an infrastructure and paying a bunch of it was, I had 2 clients, and it was a basic basic work. I think we're just doing SEO and some web work, very easy.
When did you guys decide when you wanted to get serious, where to kind of scale the business to an actual agency rather than kind of just freelancers?
That was actually the first meeting that my co-founder and I had, because I knew that my background, I could sell, I could build a business, I could do PM, but I wasn't an implementer. And my co-founder was. And so ultimately, like, she has a SEO and paid search background. I can bring in the clients, run the company, and kind of like that background, all of the infrastructure stuff. And so she was a freelancer for a long time too. I mean, so we were already going in at 2, 3, 4 years at least of contracting. And so at that point was actually the first time, like, we're actually going to start an agency. But I'm telling you, like, I did all the creative, I built the site myself. But so I tell people, VisualFizz was launched with $50 and a crappy logo, and I'll take blame for that. But that was how we wanted to start, and people just kind of had to trust us.
What's been the biggest surprise, from going back then to, where you're at today?
I mean, in the business where you sell time, right? We sell knowledge and time. It's getting good people, and how hard it is to get really good people. I'd say, like, that's always the struggle for most agencies, I think, and especially small ones, because you can get by with a couple of bad eggs when you have a couple hundred people and they go unnoticed. But when you have a small team and you really rely on them to do good work, I think it's a challenge to rely on individuals who may not be able to put their best foot forward when you count on them. So, as a founder, the toughest part is letting go a little bit. And each new person you bring on, you let go of that department or, that piece of the pie that I've always called it. And it's apprehension to let go until you feel really confident. And then sometimes you have to hold on long and never let go because that right person still isn't there. We deal with that even today, and 8, 9 years later, that we have to step in because we have to find the right people for it.
Now, where do you find the best people? Because
man,
that is, I think for every business, that's always been a challenge.
Yeah.
I never, I always tell everybody, especially on the podcast, is I'm a horrible manager. I don't want to hire people that I need to manage. I want to hire more seasoned people that can manage themselves, manage other people. I'm just kind of the pretty color chicken dancing on the stove, I guess. So,
it's really hard, and we've gone through bouts of it where it's sometimes like we find the perfect person. Oh, great! But I was just talking about it yesterday. The average time that we've put out a job posting, we get no less than 700 to 1,500 applications, and this is before right now, and we're having obviously lots of job open, a lot of people looking for jobs. I mean, we put out a marketing manager post. It got 1,500. We had to close all because we couldn't physically spend the time. So it's a lot of intuition and just feeling like a gut reaction that this person's going to be good. And we don't need to hire the best person that's the most data driven and analytical and has the best credentials that went to Harvard. I actually prefer not to hire that type of person. I like entrepreneurially minded people who are down to earth and a culture fit, who are willing to grow and expand and learn, that also have the years of experience, and when you can combine those and they're willing to like adapt, because marketing 8 years ago is not marketing today, that's the right person. And so it's been a hybrid between, a lot of sifting, a lot of interviews, and ones where we're like, this was just not right. It looked good on paper, horrible in person. And some were people that have contracted us for, with us for years. I have an individual on my team who I kind of every month was like, are you ready to be a full-timer? Are you ready to be a full-timer? And eventually she listened and came onto the team. But you need to work with people to understand their capabilities. And that's why oftentimes I like to do contract to hire or contract for a while until we have a baseline need for that can cover their expenses. I'm very fiscally conservative, with the business. And it's very important that because I've seen issues on the other end of it from my previous background, that I never overhire. I always use the teeter-totter analogy, and I never want to be like this. I always want to be this. And so we've built that hybrid model. And when I feel like we're like this and I could afford very comfortably and conservatively to bring on another person and scale them up and scale up the business with that service, we bring them in. And I get the team involved with that too. I want my team to be able to think, oh, that person's a culture fit. I want to work with them.
One of the things you may want to look at, because we've had a lot of members over the years where they've had that same frustration. They'll post on a stupid job board and they'll get inundated by too many applications because these jackasses are just going submit. They don't even know what they're applying to.
Oh yeah, we've got some.
And one of the ways to get your time back is this: bury in the very bottom of the job description, do not apply here. You must email this email address with this exact subject line and a 2 to 3 minute video on why you want to work with us. So what will happen is 1,500 people will apply, jackasses. Out of the 1,500, 10 will email you. Out of the 10, 5 will have the subject line. Out of the 5, there'll be 2 or 3 with a video.
Love that. That's a great idea. Yeah. Make them work a little bit harder. And that's even been the challenge with like contract team members now too. Same thing, because there's so much out there, and so we've done a little bit, not to that extent, but like we require them to have legitimate LinkedIn. We require them to have all FaceTime, on-screen videos, and then we test them quite heavily on VisualFizz only projects before they ever touch a client project. And if they've gone through numerous steps of kind of legitimizing themselves, especially in this remote world, we just don't know where they are. It's gotten very difficult. And so ultimately, without all of those things and references and kind of diving back and forth, until we know that they are a good fit, they never touch client projects.
I've just gotten so frustrated by how easy it is to, hire someone, find someone, but finding that right person, I want to make them jump through so many loops. And like when I tell people this, people are like, oh, that's kind of a bad move because you're making people do more work. I'm like, well, if they really want to work for us, I can't tell you how many times I've jumped on and interviewed people that don't even know the name of the company.
Oh yeah. The number of interviews I've had with people in their car, like eating, I've had people who are woodworkers as a profession, and they've gone to look at jobs or and listen, everybody starts somewhere, and I get it, but read the job descriptions, because I ask people, hey, how much have you spent as a social media manager on paid social per month, let's say, and they go somewhere around like 10 to 20. And I'm like, okay, $10,000 to $20,000 per month. Like, okay, then you could train up from there. And I'm like, they're like, no, $10 to $20. And I'm like, this is you're in the car talking about your $10 to $20 paid ad budget. Like, so it is challenging. And then you think this is founder time, right? And I don't mean to say our time is more valuable than others by any means, but ultimately we've got the same 8 hours in a day, if that. And it adds up. And lately, my time's even been more challenging to get. And so when I'm spending that time talking to somebody that hasn't spent the time to research us and really put in that effort, you're right. Like, you just have to end the call there. So, I think that's a challenge.
Look, your agency adapts for every client, right? Your builder should do the same. That's why Wix Studio is built for the way you actually create. AI-powered site mapping lets you get straight down to the design. Whether you shape things in Figma or start in Studio, your vision's coming to life quicker with no-code animations and built-in responsiveness. And for client growth that actually scale, you've got extendable business solutions and a dynamic CMS. Scale your agency at wixstudio.com.
What key hire or what key role have you hired that gave you a lot more time back?
I think my co-founder and I will have different answers, but for me personally, we brought in a project manager a few years ago after one of ours left, and I have a great relationship. That's actually the only person who's really left the company, but she's been incredible and came in as just a standard project manager and is currently our project lead. And having this individual on my team has allowed me to really focus my energy on big picture kind of branding. Like if I have a client, I'm still very involved. It's a hard part of being an owner, kind of operator, if you will, and getting away from projects when you really enjoy brand work and web work and you enjoy that part of your job. I know I have to step away, but one, they make it very easy for me to step away from a operational standpoint. And two, they'll call me out on my BS, right? They're like, Dan, you've been on this for too long, get out. I try to avoid messaging late. Like if it's Friday at 5 or 6, and she's like, Dan, leave. Like you're done with your day. And I appreciate when a team member can have fun with that and not, like be condescending, but also be like, we're good. Like you can step out of here. Like you don't, that and building a lot of SOPs for the business alongside us. Like, hey, we need to do a better job of our tracking. And then that individual own the heck out of that. Like that has been really beneficial for me in my role, kind of trying to manage the company. And if that person can manage the team and the operations, then I can manage winning new clients and new business and VisualFizz strategy. And then coming into client projects kind of level-headed instead of thinking about if we hit a deliverable date. It doesn't matter to me. Of course it does, but that's her plate, not mine.
What's the next role that you want to bring in to give you more time back?
There's so many. And again, I feel like every person you ask is going to have a different answer because I'm like, can you bring this person? I'm like, I want to, but money. For me, I would love to bring in like a marketing manager, like a seasoned marketing manager. I don't necessarily need a director, but somebody who can have a creative lens on a lot of what we're doing and understand it's almost a hybrid between a campaign strategist and a marketing manager, but I would say a creative marketing manager, somebody who can look at a series of designs and say, no, this isn't good. Like, no, this isn't going to client. Or QA a document that's semi-technical, not like dev technical, but an SEO report or something, and say, I don't think the client's going to want to see this. It doesn't make sense to them. Let's word it differently. And then can come into a campaign and do something else. Or even like whip up, something I do often is I'm like, I can't get this vision out of my head. So I go into like Canva or like an Adobe XD and just throw something up. Somebody who has that ability to do that quickly, who could take over that day-to-day kind of campaign thinking, but also speaks to both ends of like a PM meets a creative director with analytics. So I know that's like a lot of people, but there are a few people who are wired like that to think in that way where they're not experts, but they're good enough at those 3 points to kind of equal out the perfect team member.
Yeah, PM and being creative is what I've found very like a unicorn. It's almost like finding a programmer and someone that can design you a landing page or print design. I mean, they're out there. The one thing that I've learned is think about what's that one role you want and just find it for that one thing. If you find them that can manage multiple people, even better. It's tough. I was always looking for, like, one example, project managers. Like, you were a project manager. Now, you might be a unicorn because, right, like you're an entrepreneur and you created the agency. But what I found is project managers, they live and die and they love getting stuff done. Account managers on the reverse side, they love creating new stuff, right? They're more strategy. They're saying, oh, let's create this, let's build this. And they're leading the client this way. So when I would try to force my PM to be an account manager to sell new business, to bring in new business, they were like, oh, no, selling is bad. Like it's the 4-letter word. I need to stay away from it. And when I realized that, then I started hiring just project managers and account managers. And it was so much easier to find people. Even though I did have some unicorns, which are amazing, that's the curse, right? You find a unicorn and then you believe in unicorns.
I know. No, I get it. And I do have a couple people like that. Where like they're just, I'm on a lot of client calls and, she's listening in as a PM, everything's on track. And then the client says something and I go, oh, and I unmute. And then she says the thing I'm going to say. And I'm like, bless you. Like that is, because it's, I kind of do feel like I am creative and marketing driven. So, but I've been running an agency for, 9 years. So it's different. I'm not a specialist anymore. Or I guess generalist because it's a PM.
Well, you're forced to do it. Like we're forced to do it.
Yeah. It's just in like intuition to get to that answer. But you're absolutely right. And, VisualFizz does not have account managers where PM is the AM. And that's kind of we've just been small. And so we've never structured it that way. And so I do a lot of like, even this is kind of off this conversation, but I try to do like sales training with my team to understand, like our goal is not to upsell the client for the sake of upselling, but to upsell because a lot of them, our clients don't know that we offer other things. They came to us for SEO, but they don't know that we do full on web or video. And so it's just to make sure the client's aware that these exist. But hearing between the lines is very important. That's something that has to be trained over time. A client says, I'm going to do an audit of all my content. Well, you say, well, why don't you get my SEO involved? She's amazing at it. Like that's what we need to keep thinking as project managers in order to help the client, but also sell up as an agency.
What I've found that helps get the team to a fast place is it's kind of a 3-step process. Think of your methodology for success. When people join our community, we have attract, convert, and scale. That's our methodology so they can eventually have the option to sell or get out of the things that they don't want to do. And so define the methodology, and then we'll create the success stories, or what we call case stories, based on the methodology. So we'll create maybe, let's say, a visual Trello board, like just your 3 columns or 4 columns, right? Track, convert, scale, and sell. And then we'll put stories in there. And then how did they do it? What did they do? Like that kind of stuff. And then I would share that. The third part is sharing that with the team. So then they understand, oh man, they were struggling with X, Y, and Z. They were struggling with being able to bring in new accounts. But now they figured out this system, or they had a ton of leads, but they weren't converting, and they implemented a foot in the door strategy. And then the team could just tell those stories. And it was amazing because then they didn't treat it as sales. It was all just about telling a story.
And identifying problems, it sounds like, too. Like identifying the problem instead of trying to be reactive to a solution or a problem that comes from other things. It's like just thinking retroactively of like, what does this client actually need? Budget's never unlimited. So work your way backwards, right? I do that a lot in my biz dev. Is like, what's your all-in budget? Because I'm going to give you my recommendations on what I think is going to perform the best. And I'm not going to sell you the thing that's not. Sure, I can make 10% more profit, but like you're not going to stick with me for long enough to see it because I've sold you on something that's not what you need.
Yeah, I've always told you position what they need, not what you want to sell them. And that's a big difference between the great agencies and the agencies that won't be around very long.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's plenty of those coming up.
Oh yeah. There's always, right? Like there's so much change all the time. If you think about it, maybe not as much change after COVID, because COVID just made it really easy for people to create businesses, and really easy because the market was just so great. But when the market starts changing a little bit, I get excited because I know those jackasses are going out.
Yep. Well, I almost see it as like, people are tightening their purse strings. And what I found based on our own positioning was like, people wanted to go for the Ogilvies and the BBDOs and the Leos, and now they're going to the mid-large, and the mid-large are going to mid, and mid are going to small. So as a boutique agency, I've had a lot of conversations with companies doing couple $100 million. Kind of our sweet spot's like 100 to 500 million. And they're like, I don't want to work with a 200 person agency. I want to be the 4th largest client or 3rd largest client on your P&L. I want you to think of me as the important one instead of being a small fish in a big pond for, a big company. So that's been really good in positioning to say like, hey, listen, like you don't need to be the small guy. You come to us and it's like, it's like going to a boutique hotel with 8 rooms versus like a massive 3,000 room, hotel where you're kind of like thrown into dogs. So it's like, that's been really something I've noticed this past year is everything's moved down a notch. And I think that's actually helped companies my size or maybe a little larger, maybe a tiny bit smaller, obtain bigger clients that have a more experienced approach towards marketing versus maybe like a startup, like a seed funded startup, which is kind of all in on something that they don't quite know yet.
Yeah. I truly believe the bigger agencies will suffer in the future. I see it right now. Even when I look back at the 100 people that we had a couple years ago, we could have created that with 40 people. Now we probably could do it with around 15. It's so, the bigger agencies, just to have a ton of people, they just can't stay at that level. But it'd be interesting to see how fast that changes. But it's coming. The big guys better watch out.
I think so too.
I'm just trying to help out the little guys. I could care less about the big guys.
Yeah. I think if they're not working on an M&A strategy now, like they're going to be suffering pretty big, because even the big brands, like I know a handful of agencies that they're small. They're like sub 5 million revenue that are working with like large corporations. We've worked with some pretty big corporations. Like I'd rather work with you on SEO because you guys are good and like candidly 1/3 the price, but versus the guys are going to charge $50K a month for the same thing we charge $8K for, and I totally agree with you that unless they find true verticalized like mergers to continue growing, they are probably going to decline pretty heavily or have to sell off portions of their business.
Yeah, exactly. Well, cool. Well, Dan, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story and sharing your point of view. That's why we do the podcast. There's, we always just want to share a lot of ideas that all of you listening can kind of just pick apart, right? Because there's no silver bullet. There's only just little pits of silver that you got to mine here and here and here and put them together, create a great bracelet and grow your agency. Because that's the fun part. No one's ever got it 100% figured out. If they do, they're lying. And look at that refund policy. But well, thanks so much for coming on the show. For everyone listening, if you want to hear more podcasts, make sure you subscribe. And until next time, have a swank day.